a young mother on the verge of a new beginning.
She always used to talk about her wedding. She had everything planned out.
She was going to be living the life that she's always dreamt of having.
Violently struck down.
Not just homicide, but an act of rage.
I had no idea why somebody would want to do that.
Police chase a deranged killer down a sinister path.
He was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. Someone burnt the house down.
Through a maze of twisted theories.
Maybe this was a retaliation.
It was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
Until the case takes a mind-bending turn.
He looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong."
That person never was on our radar.
Just an epic tragedy.
I was almost in disbelief.
That's just something that was entirely unexpected from the beginning.
Until we try to rule them in or rule them out, I don't know that any of us are safe.
On Sunday, August 10th, 2014, in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Jackson, Michigan, a quiet morning is broken by a desperate phone call.
Our dispatch did receive a 911 call from a panicked individual.
911.
Yeah, I need somebody up to my house right now. My fiance, I think she's dead.
Okay, so has she been sick?
No, there's blood everywhere.
Do you know where it's coming from?
I don't know.
Okay, can you tell if she's breathing?
She's not. She's cold. She's dead. Oh my God.
Police race to the home just before 11 a.m., where they're greeted by the caller and 3 young girls.
He had said that the deceased body was up in a bedroom upstairs. There was 2 bedrooms that we walked past, which were bedrooms where the kids had been sleeping.
With the 3 children who lived there safely out of the house and the crime scene locked down, detectives come upon a grisly sight.
As we enter the bedroom, then we do see the body. It was slumped down between the bed and the wall. And there was quite a bit of blood. At that point, we see zip ties on her hands, and we see what appears to be several stab marks.
A zip tie was wrapped around each wrist, with another looped through it and cut, as though she'd been strapped to the bed and then cut loose.
We, at that point, determined we likely had a homicide.
The police talk to Eric Wolf, who placed the 911 call. He tells them the victim is his fiancée, 28-year-old Frances Craig. He also makes a startling admission.
He said that he had worked all night, so when he came home, after finding Franny in the condition she was in, he then went downstairs and slept on the recliner chair. For whatever reason, he did not call 911 until a couple hours later in the morning.
Frances's 2 daughters and Eric's little girl were all in the house at the time. While Eric slept, his 10-year-old child walked into a horrifying scene.
Eric's daughter, Lexi, went into the bedroom and clearly could tell that something was amiss. She even touched her and could tell that she was not moving. I think she might even have described her as a little cold.
Lexi went downstairs and woke up her father. And that's when he finally called 911.
We all felt that a normal, average individual would, at the bare minimum, make sure their fiancé, the person they're about to get married to and spend the rest of their life with, is okay.
Eric's decision to walk away from the murder scene is a red flag for investigators. And so is his casual demeanor.
When Eric was interviewed by one of the other detectives at the scene initially, the detective said he didn't seem too concerned, didn't seem too upset about what had happened.
Detectives plan to grill Eric about his suspicious behavior. But first, they need to finish processing the crime scene.
There was approximately 90 stab wounds, and they were in a very aggressive manner.
It was overkill. Not just committing a homicide, but an act of rage where it's over the top.
The rule of thumb is on a situation where there's multiple, and I'm talking more than a dozen stab wounds, it's usually a crime of passion. So at that point, you typically look at somebody close to the victim.
Investigators sift through the bloody mess for clues. There's no sign of a murder weapon, but plenty of signs of conflict.
The crime lab, which is the CSI people, they responded to the scene. They were there for multiple hours collecting a ton of evidence.
While the forensics team works the scene inside. Shocked friends and family have gathered outside the house.
I didn't believe her. I thought it was a lie. It's not real. It didn't happen.
I had no idea why somebody would want to do that. Frances was just an amazing person all around. Frances and I worked together. We hung out outside of work together. We would hang out with our kids.
Investigators learned that Frances had 2 daughters with an ex-boyfriend. The oldest is 5 years old, and the youngest is 3.
Our boyfriends actually were friends, and he brought her to my house one day, and that was like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It felt like we've known each other for years. She's a wonderful, amazing mom, the best mom that I know. She was the best person I've ever met and known in my life.
She would do anything for anyone.
Frances and the father of her children broke up, but she still dreamed of getting married.
She always used to talk about her wedding and everything, and at this point, she didn't even have a boyfriend. She had everything planned out.
Dreams became reality in 2012 when she started dating 29-year-old Eric Wolf.
Eric was a divorced single father, 1 young child. He had primary custody over her.
2 years into the relationship, Eric and Frances moved in together. Despite working 2 jobs, Frances did all she could to make time for her children and Eric's daughter, too.
She was constantly doing things with her girls when she wasn't working. Even with her stepdaughter, she was amazing.
Her days were long, but her life was full. Eric proposed, and the couple bought a house together.
Frances was very, very excited about getting married. Like, every day she was tagging me on Facebook or, like, sending me pictures. You know, she thought she was going to be living the life that she's always dreamt of having and having that fairy tale wedding.
But when detectives pressed Franny's friends, they learned that Eric had a dark side.
They told me that they weren't super fond of her fiance.
Because my daughter spent a lot of time with Frances. She was like a second mother to my daughter. And my daughter did tell me several times of Eric being kind of like a drill sergeant. He seemed real cocky, just everything was about him and his daughter more so than Frances and her girls. I felt in my gut from the moment I found out that something happened to Frances, I felt like Eric had something to do with it. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, I didn't know why. I just felt like it was because of him that she's gone.
Police are determined to get to the bottom of Eric's suspicious behavior.
When we interview him, he stated when he saw her in the condition she was in, he did not call 911, and he didn't seem too upset about what had happened. At that point, he was somebody, definitely a person of interest in the homicide of Franny Craig.
Coming up, Eric's story gets stranger by the minute.
I didn't know if this was, like self-inflicted accident.
That's what we need to find out too.
A tiny clue reveals a big surprise.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
And when police find the killer, it shocks everyone.
I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now.
After calling 911 following the brutal murder of his fiancée, Frances Craig, Eric Wolf is questioned by police about how he discovered his fiancée's body.
I came home this morning because I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. I went upstairs, I checked both the girls' room before going in our bedroom.
Okay, so you came around to the foot of the bed and kind of looked to see where she was at.
That's exactly what I did.
Okay. Did you see anything on the mattress when you first came in?
I saw, I guess I might have saw that streak, but it didn't jump out like blood or anything.
Okay, so you saw something that just didn't jump out to you.
Yeah,
this is bad.
Eric did not seem to register surprise, anger, hurt, anything that I think we all normally would want to see from a loved one when somebody is killed.
I thought maybe she had been drinking or something because she was in almost like a funny position on the floor, which she doesn't drink hardly ever. I knew better than to wake her. I know from prior experience whenever I've woken her up, she's not a morning person and I get yelled at.
As the interview creeped close to an hour, Eric suggests a much darker reason for ignoring his fiancée sprawled out on the bedroom floor.
Up until just now, maybe since we've been here, I thought that if it wasn't an accident, then it was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
He indicated that he thought maybe she had committed suicide and just did not want to deal with it at that point. We found that being very odd and a red flag. Typically on a suicide, you'll find one stab wound or one gunshot wound. You won't find multiple stab wounds.
The prospect of Franny inflicting 90 stab wounds with her hands zip-tied sounds preposterous to the police. Even if it was physically possible, why wouldn't Eric have reacted with alarm?
So you didn't want to come to grips with it if she had done so.
Right, because
you don't want to.
To investigators, Eric's shifting story doesn't add up. Why would a woman everyone described as happy and carefree take her own life?
And the only reason I say self-induced is just because of how high-strung everything is right before this wedding, and
it's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Eric's strange comments could signal that he's traumatized over the death of his fiancée, or that he's hiding something. Determined to mine the truth, detectives decide to go right at their prime suspect.
Did you?
No.
Know what?
No, I didn't do this. I didn't know anything about it. I walked in and I walked out, went to sleep, got up, went back in and reported it.
But that brings me back to the questions we just asked. You made it at least halfway into that bedroom.
I did make it, and I admit that, and I'll admit that in front of whoever needs to hear it. But I want to make that perfectly clear that my stance on this is exactly what I said. I went in for whatever reason it was. I didn't react.
Without forensic evidence to hold him, Eric is free to go, but investigators vow to keep their eye on him. And the deeper they look, the more circumstantial evidence starts to build up.
We did do a pretty thorough background, as we always do, And one thing we found out is that Eric did have a little bit of assaultive past with prior girlfriends and an ex-wife. It seems like he has some violent tendencies.
One of the strangest facts in this case is that Eric Wolf has a father who is serving a life sentence in prison for his own first-degree murder conviction.
He was convicted on a cold case homicide investigation in the 90s and was serving life in prison for murder. So that certainly put up a red flag to us.
Was it possible that violent tendencies run in the family? Even if they did, what possible reason would Eric have to want his fiancée dead?
The homicide occurred in August, and I believe their wedding was planned in September. We talked with her parents and her friends. They told me that Franny had second thoughts, and they were trying to convince her that if she was not prepared to get married, that maybe she should wait. And they also said Eric had second thoughts. Eric may have got cold feet, didn't want to get married, didn't know how to end the relationship.
While police work diligently to prove Eric's guilt, Frances's friends wait and wonder.
We didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on and what happened with Frances and how she was murdered. We just knew she was dead.
Behind the scenes, police work tirelessly. They obtain a search warrant to collect Frances's and Eric's electronics, but quickly realize that Frances's cell phone is missing.
We do find the cell phone near Franny's house. It had been thrown up against a tree and damaged. Again, we're thinking that the cell phone has some pretty valuable information.
The cellular phone data quite often can be some of the most compelling evidence.
We were able to get the phone records, and nothing really stuck out as being Franny communicating with anybody that would give us suspicion.
With no unusual cell phone activity or signs of forced entry on the day of the murder, police stay focused on Eric.
Eric Wolf at the time was at work, and investigators went and checked out, what they could to verify his alibi.
Police checked the company's security cameras.
They do have one entrance. They do have a time card check-in, check-out system. We were able to verify he was at work, or allegedly at work, when the incident occurred. The problem with the system is there's some other exits that they're not supposed to use, but some of them have cameras, but other ones do not.
Was he able to leave his place of employment and get home to commit a murder and have all of that be undetected? Eric was the only person we could figure who would have any reason to want Franny dead.
Police investigating the homicide of 28-year-old Frances Craig cannot confirm her fiancé's alibi. Since not every exit at his workplace had a security camera.
We couldn't rule out that sometime during the night he left and then came back.
Eric's shaky alibi and suspicious behavior at the crime scene doesn't give police enough to arrest him, but it does leave them with a drastic course of action.
If you are operating in a murder investigation thinking that man killed his fiancée in the home where the children were, you are thinking we want to keep the children safe. We kept Eric's daughter from him while we tried to figure out what happened to Franny.
Both Eric's and Franny's daughters are removed from Eric's home and put in the custody of family members. With pressure mounting, detectives need to move fast to prove their theory, or find a more plausible one.
At that point, we tried to determine any communication Franny may have been having with someone other than her fiancé.
Franny had an boyfriend. He no longer lived in the area, but he had returned to the area recently and had some level of connection or interaction with Franny.
The police press Franny's ex. Could he have committed this heinous crime?
That young man was a nice young man, came from a very, very nice family.
And he did have an alibi where he was at the time of the incident. We were able to verify that alibi, so we were able to eliminate him.
If no one in Frances's immediate circle wished her harm, what about her coworkers? Detectives learned that while Frances worked at a retail store, she was involved in a frightening incident.
Where Franny was working, there was a couple shoplifters that had stolen some clothing. She confronted them.
The confrontation turned to violence when the mother of the two young shoplifters jumped in, attacking Frances. The assault left Frances with a severe eye injury, as well as emotional scars.
The incident at work left Frances really scared, nervous, cautious.
The mother of the shoplifters was actually criminally charged for a crime for the assault, some type of unarmed robbery. She was convicted.
So there was some concern that maybe this was a retaliation for that situation.
We did surprise them with a visit. They did have alibis on where they would have been at that time that the incident occurred.
Investigators are able to verify those alibis, eliminating the women as suspects. Frustrated detectives are still hoping that DNA from the crime scene will help them find the killer. But while they wait for results from the crime lab, the people of Jackson attend Franny's funeral, their emotions raw from the news of her violent death.
Her mail carrier showed up to her funeral because she left such an impact on that person. That's how loved and how missed Frances Craig is.
This was definitely a shock to the community because we don't have that many homicides.
I was scared. I just didn't know what to expect.
I was afraid to leave the house. I was afraid to do anything because we still had no answers as to what happened.
The overwhelming feeling was the pressure we were under to get this right.
Determined to find justice for Franny, investigators continue to drill down on Frances's fiancé. Hoping for an inside look at Eric Wolf, they bring in one of the couple's former roommates.
Ryan Marshall was friends with Eric Wolf. So Eric and Franny welcomed Ryan into their home to stay with them.
His house had caught on fire and she was trying to help a friend out.
He lived with them until April of 2014. The homicide happened August of 2014. So he had a pretty good knowledge of the two of them. He said everything was good. And he actually vouched for Eric, saying Eric was a really good guy and a friend for a long time and doesn't feel that Eric would ever do anything to harm Franny.
Speaking with Ryan doesn't give police new reasons to suspect Eric, but it doesn't clear him either.
3 months in, we've pretty much eliminated everybody of interest, anyone close to Franny other than Eric. But we don't have enough evidence to present to the prosecutor.
But then, a new piece of information arrives that brings a new suspect into the spotlight.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
Three months after Frances Craig's murder, the lab results from the crime scene finally arrive, and they provide a huge break in the case.
were notified through a national index. The DNA located on the zip ties matched DNA in a database.
When somebody commits a felony, they have to submit to a DNA test. Somebody's DNA showed up on the zip ties that were used in the homicide. We get a name of Cortez Butler.
Who is Cortez Butler? Police waste no time looking into his criminal record.
We find out Cortez Butler served approximately 25 years for murder and was currently on parole in the Detroit area.
But we knew almost nothing else. We tried to determine if we could connect Cortez Butler to Franny Craig, to Eric Wolf, and we came up with nothing. We tried to determine if he had family locally, and we came up with nothing.
In fact, Cortez Butler appears to have no connection to Jackson whatsoever.
So we look in our database to see if we have any Cortez Butlers in any police report we've done, any place in Jackson County, and we find none.
Then it was this mad scramble of, well, then how do we even tie Cortez Butler to this? For all we know, he may have worked at Home Depot, and his DNA may be on these zip ties for a completely innocent reason.
The investigators connected with Cortez's parole officer. They got Cortez's phone number. A search warrant was prepared and signed for Cortez Butler's phone records. We learned that Cortez Butler's phone was in Jackson on the early morning hours of August 10th, the actual time of the murder. The rest of those phone records almost exclusively placed it in and around the greater Detroit area, never in Jackson.
But what reason would Butler have to harm Franny?
Eric remained the prime suspect. He was the only dude with a motive.
Maybe Eric was not ready to get married and didn't know how to end a relationship.
So then the thought process was, did Eric hire this person to kill Franny?
The cell phone records also connect Butler to some other shady characters.
We were able to identify a Clifford and Rodney McKee as being connected to Cortez Butler. Clifford McKee lived in the Detroit area. Clifford McKee was in prison for approximately 20 years for murder. We found out that Rodney McKee, he was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. We found out that he had committed arson.
The arson that Rodney McKee perpetrated was against Donna and Ryan Marshall.
The police are stunned. Ryan Marshall is Eric Wolf's friend. The one who had been welcomed into Franny and Eric's home after his house burned down. But what kind of a connection could Ryan possibly have to a drug dealer like Rodney McKee?
Ryan Marshall's mother had been a heroin dealer for Rodney McKee.
But after months of dealing for Rodney, Ryan's mother decided she wanted out.
Donna Marshall refused to sell heroin for Rodney McKee.
Rodney didn't like to be told no.
Ryan's mother, Donna, held her ground, but Rodney retaliated.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it.
Ryan witnessed it all. He then contacted the police.
What was the connection between Eric Wolf, Cortez Butler, the Marshalls, and a drug dealer from Detroit? Detectives knew there was only one person who could answer the question, and soon they'd have a chance to ask him face to face.
Cortez Butler was arrested for yet another murder. Not Franny's murder, but another murder in the greater Detroit area.
We went down there in Detroit with one sole purpose: to gather information from Cortez Butler on what happened to Franny and hopefully be able to explain to us what Eric's role in this whole thing was. But Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal.
It was clear that whatever Cortez was going to say, it was not going to be, quote unquote, on the record.
Investigators have DNA evidence and phone records that link convicted killer Cortez Butler to Francis Craig's murder. They arrange to talk to him while he's detained for an unrelated homicide. But he immediately tries to shut them down.
Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal. I said, no one is giving you any kind of a deal without anyone knowing what you have to say.
Detectives press Butler hard until he finally agrees to talk. But only on one condition.
Cortez very pointedly and specifically asked repeatedly to not have the interview recorded.
If detectives agree not to record the interview, there's a chance Butler's testimony won't stand up in court. Still, with no other leads in the case, they decide to roll the dice.
We were there interviewing Cortez in the first place because we need to find out Eric Wolf's involvement in this. And it was dire that we did so as the children were about to go back with Eric Wolf. The whole idea for that was to keep these kids safe.
So the detectives tried to read him his rights. He didn't even want to be bothered with the rights. I know my rights. I think it was, bro, I know my rights, bro.
Butler wastes no time getting right to the point.
Cortez looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong." And I said, "Have what all wrong?" And he, at that time, let us know that Eric had absolutely nothing to do with this murder.
He goes, "I don't know this dude you're talking about, know nothing about him. Just trust me, he was not involved in this whatsoever."
The statement contradicts one of the investigators' strongest leads, but the next thing Butler says is even more explosive.
Cortez identifies himself as the killer. I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now, because I was almost in disbelief.
If Eric wasn't involved, why had this cold-blooded criminal murdered a woman to whom he had no obvious connection? It all went back to Rodney McKee's arson case.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it. Ryan Marshall was a key witness in his arson case.
He made some threats to Ryan that either he not agree to testify or he was going to be killed.
Cortez told us that he had been hired by Rodney McKee to kill Ryan Marshall.
First, Butler had to find Ryan, who was homeless because of the fire.
So we found out from Cortez Butler that they had bad information. They had information that Ryan Marshall was living with Francis Craig and Eric Wolf.
Cortez Butler entered Francis and Eric's house to kill someone who was no longer there.
Franny wasn't even the intended target. Franny was as innocent of a victim as anybody could ever be. When he opened the door, he had made the decision that he was killing somebody while he was there.
He doesn't have to force entry. He gets into the house. He noticed the bedrooms have some kids in it. He walks past them, and he goes to Franny Craig's room. When he gets to Franny Craig's room, he asks her where Ryan is. She said he's not there. Cortez tells Franny not to look at him. In his words, he stated she looked at him, so he had to kill her.
The horrific details that Cortez reveals next leave detectives with no doubt about the guilt of the man sitting across from them.
He decided to bind her, trying to get information from her, but she would not cooperate.
Cortez stabbed her multiple times.
We will never know how long he took to torture her and butcher her. And it clearly took time and effort to stab and slice her in the manner that he did. She died in the service of keeping Ryan's identity and his location secret, and/or she quite frankly just didn't know.
Cortez Butler's chilling confession is nothing short of a game changer, both for detectives and for Eric Wolf.
It eliminated our hypothesis that Eric Wolf was responsible for Franny's death.
Eric wasn't involved. He's an odd duck kind of guy.
Eric was able to regain custody of his daughter.
I took from this case that we can never jump to conclusions. I was pretty convinced that he did it, not to the point that I could charge him, but I was pretty convinced I had the right person.
Now that investigators do have the right person, they're determined to put Cortez Butler away for life. But all of that is in jeopardy.
I didn't believe that Cortez's confession would be legally admissible in court because it wasn't recorded. And if Cortez Butler ever walked free again, I don't know that any of us are safe.
After months of dead ends, investigators finally have a confession from Francis Craig's killer. But prosecutors are concerned that his testimony may not hold up in court.
I was concerned that it would be legally inadmissible because it wasn't recorded. He was basically told, "We're not planning to use this in court against you." I was concerned that he had not been properly advised of his Miranda rights. But we still had his DNA on the zip ties and the cell phone records. So I kept thinking, and I finally got myself legally to a point where I was convinced that we need to give this a shot.
In October of 2015, Cortez Butler is charged with Francis's murder. When the trial begins 6 months later, Butler appears relaxed, almost giddy.
Cortez really seemed to thrive in that trial atmosphere. He would seek out cameras and smile at them, give them this big, full teeth smile.
He wanted to fight just because he could. He wanted to run the show just because he could.
But that's just a warm-up for the verbal assault he launches into when he takes the stand.
Cortez Butler was a monster at that trial. He bragged on how many bodies he had. It was unbearable.
Butler gleefully describes his murderous past in gory detail. But when asked about killing Francis, he fiercely denies it.
He clearly was so excited to say why he didn't commit this murder because he pleads to all of his murders, and he clearly didn't commit this one because he didn't plead to it.
Butler also denies ever confessing to police. But in a victory for prosecutors, the judge allows detectives to testify about Butler's confession.
We're able to get past that piece because he wasn't in custody for our case. He wasn't actually entitled to his Miranda warnings.
Eyewitness accounts play a major role in trying to move the jury, beginning with Eric's daughter, who found Franny dead.
Alexis was our first witness up there, and I don't know that I will ever forget the audible gasps and sobs and emotion pouring from the jury just from that first witness.
The physical evidence is laid out.
We have Cortez Butler's DNA on the zip ties that were used in the homicide, and we also have phone tracking information showing Cortez Butler and Jackson.
Prosecutors make a compelling case, but without a recording of Butler's confession, it's the detective's word against Butler's. When the jury returns with the verdict, there's no guarantee which way the cards will fall.
Cortez Butler was convicted of first-degree murder, and he won't ever walk free again.
The sentence was life without the possibility of parole for the premeditation murder of Franny Craig.
This was a complicated story to tell to a jury. It is a difficult one for all of us to wrap our brains around, even still.
Cortez goes to look for Ryan at her house, and he doesn't find him, and murders Franny in her own bed while she's doing nothing wrong.
Franny had no connection to her killer whatsoever. We can rest maybe a little easier that the bad guys won't ever hurt anybody else, at least not outside of the walls of prison. But none of it brings Franny back.
Today, Francis's two daughters live with their father. Those closest to Francis do everything they can to hold on to her memory.
Franny's family, I know, they've been lost ever since. I've been lost ever since Francis has been murdered.
I want people to remember how happy of a person she was, how generous, how nice and kind she was.
I miss Francis so much, and there's not a day that goes by that I do not think about her. I know that she's watching over everybody and making sure that everybody's good, because that's the type of person she was.
I wish I had known her, and I hope I honored her in my handling of this case.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A generous soul.
She was a very giving person and a very sharing person.
Who helped neighbors in need.
When they needed extra money for baby food or diapers, Janora was always there.
Is found brutally murdered.
This homicide was one of the most violent homicides that I've worked.
There was blood from basically the floor to the ceiling.
It was something that shocked the community.
Police uncover a sinister trail of deception and hate.
He had some strange tendencies. He seemed to be stalking her.
The polygraph came back with some clear signs that he was being deceptive.
To unveil a killer no one expected.
He made her believe that he was her knight in shining armor, so she never saw it coming.
He had two completely different faces on him. He was just the devil incarnate.
One hot summer morning in the sleepy rural town of Clinton, Louisiana, the sheriff's office gets a call that sends them to a farmhouse just outside of town. It belongs to a woman named Genora Guillory.
When Genora didn't show up for work on Monday morning, her coworkers started to get nervous. They called her cell phone, she didn't answer. They called her landline, and it was busy, stayed busy. At that point, a friend at work called the sheriff's office in East Feliciana and said, "Would you please go check on our coworker, Genora Guillory?"
The deputy that worked for the East Feliciana Sheriff's Office, and he went to the residence to look for her. The door was unlocked. And he discovered the body.
He backed out of the house, and he said he threw up outside. He could barely even speak to the dispatcher. He was so upset by what he found.
Detectives are called to the scene.
You could tell something had happened at the very entrance of the door. There was blood right there on the door handle.
The blood on the floor leads detectives inside the house.
There, you could follow the blood trail, and it went into the kitchen. There were several knives that had blood on them inside of the drawer. There was also evidence like someone tried to use the phone, and there was blood on the side of the phone.
The blood leads to the bedroom, where detectives are met with a gruesome sight. In the middle of the floor lies the lifeless body of 42-year-old Genora Guillory.
You could see evident tears in her skin, which, I mean, we knew at the time were deep stab wounds. She was beaten severely. There was blood from basically the floor to the ceiling.
The lamp was broken and stuff knocked over in the bedroom.
I've seen other homicides that I've worked that this one was more brutal.
The body was also half closed, legs opened, and she was pinned against the wall. There was a possibility that she had been raped.
Detectives in this small parish don't investigate many homicides, let alone one this brutal. They call in the Louisiana State Police to help process the scene.
They took some DNA samples of the material that was found under her fingernails.
The samples are sent to the lab to see if there are any traces of the killer's DNA.
We didn't find any type of murder weapons. We found that it was actually no forced entry. We pretty well figured that it was somebody that she knew and had a little bit of trust in to open the door.
As police collect evidence, Genora's neighbors, Philip and Amy Skipper, arrive on the scene.
They were, of course, shocked. Philip's wife, Amy, she was really destroyed, and she was a friend of Miss Guillory's.
Police inform Genora's family. Her brother-in-law, Albert, is the first to get the terrible news.
I received a call from the sheriff's office indicating that Genora was dead, had been murdered, and obviously it was just an unbelievably bad moment. To Genora's sister, my spouse at that time, Yvonne, that was probably the single most devastating moment in her life.
The family rushes to the scene. When they arrive, detectives ask them for any details they can provide about Genora.
Genora grew up in Eunice, Louisiana, a small town in St. Landry Parish. From the time that Genora was a young girl in school, she was a very giving person. She was a very intelligent woman, filled with love for life, filled with love for animals.
Genora worked at an insurance company in Baton Rouge, but chose to live in rural Clinton, where she could indulge in her passion for animals.
She had 30 dogs, she had 3 or 4 horses, she had rescue animals, she took care of friends' animals if they couldn't. Animals were a big part of her life.
Friends were a big part of Genora's life too. She was thrilled when a sweet couple moved in across the street, and they immediately hit it off.
Philip and Amy Skipper moved into her neighborhood, and I felt very comfortable that she had developed this warm relationship with the Skippers.
Over the years, Genora and her neighbors became close friends.
Genora told me how reliable they were and how hardworking they were.
Genora really liked her neighbors, and she thought of the Skippers almost like family.
Now her friends are heartbroken over Genora's violent death, and police are faced with the puzzle of finding her killer.
It made no sense. Genora had no enemies, and she wasn't involved in anything shady or suspicious.
When the autopsy report comes back the next day, it concludes that the murder took place between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. It also reveals just how brutal Genora's final moments were. She was shot 5 times with a .22 caliber gun and stabbed 5 times. But neither of these attacks caused her death.
A severe blow to the back of the head severed her brainstem from her body. She was actually alive, and she was fighting back and was stabbed and shot.
This was one of the most violent homicides that I've worked. It was a very much overkill, which usually means it is a crime of passion.
This was a particularly brutal, dastardly deed. We all stood outside Genora's house that morning and talked about who could possibly have done this.
Despite the concern of Genora's family and friends, detectives can't rule out anyone as a suspect.
We began talking to the neighbors and co-workers, the ones that showed up, and just started trying to get information.
One person in particular draws investigators' attention: Genora's neighbor, Philip Skipper.
Philip was real calm. What really got me was his over wanting to help too much, you know. We just had a feeling Philip knew something.
Coming up, investigators uncover a dark obsession.
He was infatuated with her and couldn't take no for an answer.
And menacing secrets.
They called her names behind her back all the time, but never to her face.
There was an incentive for them to actually murder her.
That leads them to a suspect they never expected.
They went on a tour of the murder scene, and he described the whole thing.
He just blurted out, "Do you have a woman named Mrs. G that was murdered over there?"
After 42-year-old Genora Guillory is found savagely killed in her home, detectives in Clinton, Louisiana suspect that her neighbor, Philip Skipper, might know something about the murder.
Philip was over helpful at the crime scene, and it is something that we wanted to check out more.
Police decide to bring in Philip Skipper and his wife, Amy, for an interview.
Genora really liked her neighbors, and the Skippers had a young child and their stepson, who was 15 years old at the time.
Philip Skipper tells investigators that when his young family first moved to Clinton, they were down on their luck, but their neighbor Janora kindly helped out.
She started to take them under her umbrella and make sure that they had food and made sure that they had electricity.
When the Skippers needed extra money for baby food or diapers, Janora was always there. The trailer they were living in, for example, was really dilapidated, so Janora helped them buy a new trailer. She helped them improve their lives as much as she could.
Janora's kindness didn't stop there.
She started to employ Philip to do all of the work in her yard and around the house, and employed Amy Skipper to do the work inside her house.
Janora treated the Skippers like family and trusted them with keys to her property.
She was just a very, very generous neighbor.
Detectives want to know if the Skippers ever argued with Janora. Amy Skipper said their relationship had recently been strained by an unfortunate incident.
Philip Skipper was raising pit bulls, and there was one dog that was not a pit that didn't get along with his other pit bulls, and Janora agreed to keep that in her kennel with her dogs. Well, that dog somehow got loose during the day while Janora was at work. The dog ran back to the Skipper's trailer and killed a goat they kept as a pet. Amy Skipper ran over to Janora's house, got on the phone, called Janora at work, and was upset with Janora. Now that's witnessed by a couple of Janora's co-workers who heard Janora's end of the conversation. She was crying by the end of this phone call. That's how upset Janora was. And Janora told Amy Skipper on the phone, "Leave the key at my house, get out of my house, and never come back."
When police question Philip about the conflict, he tells them that he and Amy had since patched things up with Janora, and they were back on friendly terms.
Philip Skipper was dismissive about the falling out. He said it was just a dispute among neighbors, and they worked it out, and there was no lingering after effects.
Police are skeptical about Philip's version of events, and when they notice scratches on his arms, they wonder if they were made by Janora while trying to fight for her life.
Questioned him about that. He said it was from him and his stepson wrestling in the yard.
Not convinced by his story, investigators ask Philip where he was on the night of the murder.
And he said he was asleep at the time that the murder happened.
To confirm Philip's story, police asked to interview his 15-year-old stepson, John Ballio.
When you interview the juveniles in Louisiana, you have to have permission of the guardian or the parent, which we had. I mean, they did cooperate there and let us talk to them.
When detectives questioned John, they noticed scratches on his arms too. Is it possible Janora fought back against two attackers?
John Ballio had marks on him. He gave us the same story.
John corroborates his stepdad's story, but police are still suspicious.
The marks on their arms was really something that we wanted to check out more if they was being truthful. So after that interview, we did decide to have a polygraph set up.
Philip and John agree to take the test, but before it can be scheduled, investigators uncover a critical detail.
During the course of the investigation, we did learn about an insurance policy Miss Guillory had taken out on herself, and the money would go to the skippers.
Was an insurance payout reason enough for the skippers to kill their friend and neighbor?
With a lack of motive, it's really hard to find the killer.
The insurance policy was an incentive for them to actually murder her.
Police have just discovered that murder victim Janora Guillory's neighbors, the Skipper family, are the beneficiaries of Janora's $25,000 life insurance policy.
And it's just kind of unusual that the neighbor would have an insurance policy and list the other neighbor as a beneficiary. They're not related.
The insurance policy raises eyebrows for investigators, but Janora's family is well aware of the policy and does not suspect foul play.
Janora wanted to make sure that the skippers had the food that they needed, had the clothing that they needed for at least a period of time should she meet an untimely departure. The skippers, after Janora's death, did not know how to collect. They contacted me and asked me to assist them, and I did.
Still, police believe the insurance money is a possible motive. That, coupled with the scratches on Philip and John's arms, convinces detectives to take the next step.
Philip Skipper and John Ballio showed up at the Baton Rouge Police Department, which has a polygraphy unit, and they both took separate polygraph tests.
The polygraph interrogator asked 15-year-old John Ballio for an alibi.
John Ballio said he was at home asleep when the murders occurred.
Both John and Philip are asked about their knowledge of the murder by the examiner. And when their responses are analyzed, detectives are surprised by the results.
Both of their tests came back with no real signs of deception.
The results on the polygraphs, they was inconclusive, and the officer that was doing the polygraph didn't think that they hadn't done the murder.
The results are a blow to the investigation, and lead detectives drop the skippers as suspects.
We still didn't have no physical evidence, and the polygraph made us think, well, we need to start looking elsewhere.
Detectives interview Janora's friends and coworkers about anyone she may have dated recently.
The friend of Miss Guillory's did give us the name of Tommy Alexandra.
Police track down Tommy at his home in a nearby town. He agrees to talk to police. Tommy tells investigators that he met Janora months prior at a feed store where she was stocking up on food for her animals. Janora agreed to meet Tommy for a drink, their first of several dates.
Tommy and Janora had dated on and off for some time.
But it soon became apparent to Janora that Tommy had other love interests.
It turned out Tommy Alexander was not just dating Janora at the time. He was dating a couple of different women.
Janora really liked him, but Tommy didn't want to settle down. He wasn't going to commit to one woman.
Is it possible that an argument between Janora and Tommy could have turned deadly?
We interviewed Tommy about the homicide.
On the night Janora was murdered, Tommy says that he was at home. Police talk to his girlfriend, who confirms his alibi.
They were able to eventually eliminate him as a suspect. As far as physical evidence to tie a specific suspect to the scene, there really wasn't anything. They kept trying to dig for facts, but they were hampered by the fact that, once again, they couldn't figure out why anyone wanted to kill her.
Determined to get justice for Janora, investigators interview her coworkers and discover that she had an ongoing conflict with a man in her life.
We learned about another friend, Steve Williams, from co-workers, and basically what we learned is that he wanted to date Miss Guillory.
But the feeling is not mutual.
Steve Williams managed to persuade Janora to go out one time, and that was enough for her. She didn't want to go out with him again, and she let him know. But he didn't take that no very well.
Miss Guillory had really got concerned about him, according to her friends. He would sit out in the parking lot and wait for her to get off from work, would show up unannounced.
Steve Williams showed up out of the blue while she was working her horses.
He pursued her a little more aggressively than was comfortable for the family.
From co-workers' explanations over there, he seemed to be stalking Janora.
Janora said, "He's bothering me and he needs to stop."
When detectives look into Steve Williams, they're shocked to learn that their potential suspect is one of their own.
Steve Williams was a Baton Rouge police officer.
Detectives have learned that Steve Williams, who had been repeatedly contacting Janora Guillory in the months before her murder, is a fellow police officer.
Steve Williams had recently gotten a job with the Baton Rouge Police Department, and he was a probationary police officer in the next jurisdiction over.
He was infatuated with her, and he was just a guy who couldn't take no for an answer.
Janora's friends knew that she was not interested, and of course after the murder, when the police are asking, well, who may have been upset with Janora, he became a focus of the investigation.
When you investigate law enforcement officers, it's harder than most because they know the law as good as you do. But we did have good cooperation through Baton Rouge City Police Department. Whatever we needed, they was willing to provide.
As investigators gather more information about Steve, they uncover an intriguing tip from one of his colleagues, 29-year-old officer Tabitha McCants.
Tabitha came forward during the investigation, and she had worked with Steve Williams at Baton Rouge Police Office.
It turns out she got kind of a bad vibe from him.
Tabitha tells investigators that she overheard Steve having heated phone conversations with a woman on several occasions while at the police shooting range.
She said they'd make multiple phone calls.
Police need to check Janora's phone records to find out if Janora was the person Steve had been calling. Tabitha also tells investigators that Steve mentioned shooting targets at his mother's home. And when they ask Tabitha if Steve mentioned the type of gun he used, her answer sets off alarm bells.
She says he used a .22, which by this time we found out that .22 was used in the shooting of Miss Guillory.
As a police officer, of course, Steve Williams had firearms. The .22 caliber pistol, which is certainly not a police gun, but he did have a .22, and he shot it at his mother's house.
Based on the history of him stalking Miss Guillory and the access to a .22, that's when we decided that we would check Steve Williams out a little bit more.
When detectives check Janora's phone records, they quickly discover an alarming pattern.
Looking at the phone records, Steve Williams, in my opinion, was stalking Miss Guillory.
The phone records showed 35 calls to Janora's home from the shooting range in 4 months, and an escalating pattern of calls and messages.
Steve Williams had left several messages for Janora the weekend that she was killed. In fact, he told her in a message that he would stop by her house on the day she was killed.
Investigators don't waste a second bringing Steve in for questioning, and when they do, his demeanor has them instantly suspicious.
Steve was real nervous. It was just something about him, like he was hiding something from us.
Steve insists he had nothing to do with Janora's murder and claims he stayed at his mother's house the night Janora was killed.
Steve's mama's residence about 40 minutes away from where the homicide was.
Police believe Janora was murdered between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Could Steve have slipped out undetected while his mother was sleeping?
Janora was shot with a .22 caliber pistol, and the fact that he had a .22, was nearby on the day she was killed, it really put him very high up on the suspect list.
That's when we had him take a polygraph.
Steve's answers are analyzed and the results sent to detectives.
Steve Williams' polygraph examination came back with some clear signs that he was possibly being deceptive.
His polygraph basically told us that he may have known something about the murder. Made me really think that he had something to do with this. That's when Steve advised he wasn't going to talk to us no more. He wanted a lawyer.
Despite Steve's refusal to cooperate, detectives continue to investigate him.
He looked like a good suspect. Now the question would be, can they find the evidence to prove it? They got a warrant for his house, they got warrants for his personal cars, and they got a warrant for his police car. Now, to do that, they had to work with the Baton Rouge Police Department. And the detectives were hoping to recover a .22, knife, anything with blood stains, anything to link him to the crime scene. They didn't find anything.
It's a major setback. But detectives still have one last piece of forensic evidence that they believe could connect Steve Williams to the murder. They get a search warrant for a DNA sample from Steve to see if it's a match for genetic material found on Janora's body.
We had those fingernail scrapings that were taken off her from the State Police Crime Lab.
It was determined, yes, there was some male DNA under her fingernails.
Coming up, investigators zero in on a vicious killer.
I picked out the worst photo that I could find of the crime scene, and I threw it in front of his face and made him look at it and said, did she deserve it?
Police hope to use DNA evidence to link Baton Rouge police officer Steve Williams to Janora Guillory's murder. Steve's DNA is compared to material found under Janora's fingernails.
His DNA was not actually determined to be under her fingernails.
The DNA also doesn't match any known criminals in the FBI database.
The fingernail scrapings came back to a known male genetic profile.
With no physical evidence linking Steve Williams to the crime, he's ruled out as a suspect, leaving investigators at a standstill.
The case had gone cold, and they had no other leads to check into.
The case stays cold for an entire year.
There was great disappointment and great frustration on the part of the family when the case went cold.
The shock of Janora's murder may have faded, but the community lives in fear of a killer who's still at large.
When a murder occurs, it's very alarming. Everybody's on edge, especially after the case was at a standstill.
Then, on July 27, 2001, a tip comes in that changes everything.
And I got a call on the telephone straight to the office. It was Detective Mark Apperson from Tangipahoa Sheriff's Office. And he just blurted out, he's like, do you have a woman named Mrs. G that was murdered over there? And I just kind of looked over at Don and I said, yeah, we do have a woman named Miss G that was killed.
The detective there was working a domestic violence battery, and the victim had came in and told him that her boyfriend knew something about a murder in Clinton.
The woman tells detectives her boyfriend's name is Donnie Fisher.
We rode over there and found Donnie Fisher. We brought him over there to the Tangipahoa Sheriff's Office.
But Donnie Fisher is not in the mood to talk.
You could tell he knew something. That's when I picked out the worst photo that I could find of the crime scene, and I threw it in front of his face and made him look at it and said, did she deserve it?
Reluctantly, Donnie looks down at the gruesome photos, and moments later, his whole demeanor changes.
He started to break down and cry. And he looked at it and then he told us, basically, his confession.
Donnie says he heard a detailed account of the murder from one of Janora's neighbors.
The neighbor took Donnie Fisher on a tour of the murder scene.
He said once they got there, he took them and said, this is how it happened.
Investigators are stunned. They question all of Janora's neighbors at the outset of the investigation, but it didn't uncover any useful information or lead to an arrest. Detectives demand that Donnie reveal the neighbor's name.
He said it was John Ballio, Philip Skipper's stepson.
Detectives are shocked. They press Donnie for details. And he claims that John told him about the murder while cleaning up Janora Guillory's house.
Janora Guillory's family had hired John Ballio to go clean up the crime scene. Donnie Fisher, he was out there helping, so as they're cleaning up the house, John Ballio was bragging to Donnie Fisher about how he killed Janora Guillory. John Ballio took Donnie and said, here's what we did here, here's what we did here, and he described the whole thing.
Investigators don't know whether to believe Donnie's story, especially since John Ballio's polygraph was considered truthful. Yet every word of it lines up with the evidence.
John actually showed Donnie how Miss G ran through the house, and talking to Donnie, he described everything that we'd put together from what we seen at the crime scene.
Detectives want to know, why would Ballio want Janora dead after all she had done for his family?
Miss Guillory would rather help somebody than hurt somebody. She would do anything she could to help the Skippers.
It's kind of heartbreaking.
Police now believe that Donnie is telling the truth. So they quickly file an arrest warrant.
We picked up John Ballio late on a Friday evening, and we brought him back to East Feliciana Sheriff's Office for charges of first-degree murder.
Investigators now believe the key to cracking this case is a confession from the alleged killer. Luckily, a recent change in Louisiana state law allows them to question a minor accused of murder without a lawyer or guardian present.
The police had to get John Ballio to come clean and tell the truth.
We brought him to my office and advised him of his rights.
He bounced from here to there during his statements at first when we initially questioned him. And then we started talking about the brutality of this homicide.
After probably an hour and a half interviewing, he finally came and told the story about how he killed Miss G.
But first, Ballio needs to get something off his chest.
He didn't do it by himself.
Pointed the finger right back at Philip Skipper.
Detectives are speechless. John Ballio just implicated his stepdad, Philip, in the murder of Janora Guillory. And that's not all.
he pointed to several other people too.
Detectives in Clinton, Louisiana have just arrested Philip Skipper's stepson, John Ballio, for the murder of 42-year-old Genora Guillory.
John started basically telling us how this went down.
And John claims he didn't act alone. He points the finger at his stepdad, Philip Skipper, and 2 other people.
Johnny Hoyt was a brother-in-law to Philip Skipper, and Lisa Skipper Hoyt was a sister to Philip Skipper. He said they killed this woman together.
Lisa and Johnny, that's the first time their name had ever came up. And we were, of course, shocked.
John Ballio gave a detailed confession on videotape to exactly what happened.
John claims that Philip, Johnny, and Lisa had formed a white supremacist gang called the Brotherhood, and that killing Genora was meant to be John's initiation into the group.
It would be my true test of brotherhood.
It was a skinhead gang. Actually, they were very anti-black and neo-Nazi.
Philip Skipper, he had 2 completely different faces on him. I mean, he had the one he presented to Genora Guillory, which was, the nice neighbor. And then behind her back, he called her all kind of names. He hated black people.
He basically made her believe that he was her knight in shining armor. She never saw it coming.
Killing Genora would not only initiate Ballio into their gang, but also bring a financial windfall.
Philip Skipper was smart enough to figure out that, hey, if she doesn't like us anymore, it's not going to be very long before she changes that insurance policy and names someone else as beneficiary.
Ballio tells detectives that on the night of the murder, the group had been drinking heavily. They arrived at Genora's door at 2 a.m.
When we got there, Lisa walked up to the door and knocked on it and told Miss G that she needed some money to get the baby some diapers.
And Miss G cracked the door open. That's when Johnny hit her and forced his way in there.
They just jumped on her like a pack of hyenas.
She ran through the house, down the hall, screaming for him to leave her alone. And she ran into the kitchen and got to the knife drawer trying to get her knife so she could cut him to make him leave her alone.
Eventually, she ran to her bedroom.
John told us that they took turns stabbing her, and they took turns beating her, and they took turns shooting her.
And then somebody threw the final blow that, according to the medical examiner, killed her instantly. It was a blow with a bat to the head.
Philip started hitting her with the bat. And after Miss G stopped breathing, they started raping her.
John Ballio said that they used condoms. There was not an indication of any seminal fluid or any semen at the scene that night.
With no evidence to back up John Ballio's claim of sexual assault, the rape charges are dropped. But detectives are still determined to bring Genora's killers to justice.
John Ballio's confession gave us enough probable cause to make sure this case got prosecuted.
For cooperating with police, John is given a deal. He pleads guilty to second-degree murder and receives a juvenile life sentence to expire when he turns 21. Lisa Hoyt also takes a plea agreement and is sentenced to 25 years. That leaves Johnny Hoyt and Philip Skipper to face justice in separate trials. When news of the arrests gets out, Genora's family is devastated.
When the family found that Philip and John were involved, they were really, really upset and angry that the people that Genora had taken care of so diligently were the ones involved in her murder.
The prosecutors are determined to bring Janora's killers to justice, but they have a problem. There's no concrete evidence linking either Philip or Johnny to the crime scene.
There was some male DNA under her fingernails, but it did not match the samples that we had from the 3 males in this case.
Both cases rest entirely on the testimony of John Ballio.
John Ballio walked us through what happened that night, and that was crucial for our case. He actually brought everything together and made the whole situation make sense to a jury. It was Philip Skipper's trial. The jury came back with a unanimous verdict. He was guilty of second-degree murder.
Philip Skipper is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Philip's wife, Amy, is not charged with any crime.
A lot of times people ask, what about Amy? What about Amy? Amy Skipper had no idea what her husband was doing.
I genuinely believe that Amy Skipper did not have any knowledge of what was going to take place. I believe that she had nothing to do with this.
Johnny Hoyt was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. But for the family of Janora Guillory, no punishment could possibly make up for the pain they suffered in the wake of her murder.
Janora's father died of a broken heart. It was just a very, very difficult time for everyone in that family. I'd like for people to remember Janora as we knew her, warm and happy, and someone who would give the shirt off her back to anyone who needed it. We are all happy to have had our lives enriched by her passage through this life.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A sweet and pure college student.
She was literally the most innocent and genuine person I've ever known.
Viciously attacked in her own home.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I mean, this child went through hell. Who would have a reason to want to kill this girl?
Police are desperate to find the killer before he strikes again.
It's panic.
There is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
But a dark trail of evidence.
He actually wound up weeping out of in a fetal position. This is bizarre. This is strange.
Leads them to a suspect.
This was someone hiding in plain sight.
They could have never imagined.
No one would have known that, not anybody.
The city of Arlington is the home of 2 professional sports teams and a major amusement park.
There's something for everybody. And if you can't find something to do, then you've got a problem.
But in early April 1994, this idyllic community was rocked to its core.
911.
And it started when police received a 911 call from the Holly Park apartment complex.
911, 825.
Woke up 3:30 in the morning, smelling smoke. I walk into my living room. There's so much smoke that I can't see. It's panic. There's a fire. We need to get out.
Residents quickly evacuate the building as firefighters arrive to battle the blaze.
You're totally helpless. You just sit there and watch everything go up in flames.
Still think about it. Just how close I came to dying.
Firefighters track the fire to its source an apartment on the second floor. Once inside, they make a horrific discovery.
Firefighters discovered a body in the bedroom. This was not just someone falling asleep in bed smoking. This was something more.
Homicide investigators are quickly summoned and try to make sense of the devastating scene.
I was informed of what the fire department had found and what they reported. We had a body inside of a burning home. Detective Stanton and I make entry into the apartment. The fire is out, but there's still a lot of damage.
Virtually everything has got like a coating of this black, nasty soot.
Fire marshals could actually smell the gasoline and were able to see pour patterns. This was an intentionally set fire.
The trail of destruction leads all the way to the bed.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I've seen bad crime scenes, and I've seen crime scenes involving people that were burnt in fires. This was elevated. A young lady who you could see, even with the smoke damage and the burn damage, you could still see that this was a victim of a very brutal sexual assault. The body was laying on her back on the bed. The positioning is consistent with sexual assault. She had trauma to her face, as though she had been physically assaulted. Clearly there was a puncture mark in the middle of her chest. This child went through hell.
It was like nothing I've ever seen. You know, who would do something as horrible as this?
A lot of evidence was destroyed simply because of the fire damage. But we found what we believe might have been the murder weapon. There was a knife in the sink.
But fire damage to the knife has robbed investigators of the forensic evidence needed to link it to the killer.
Had that fire not been set, we probably would have latent prints. No telling what we would have had.
Investigators collect the knife for testing and manage to salvage some papers that survived the inferno. For detectives, the most important goal is to identify their victim.
We found out that that apartment was in fact leased and occupied by one occupant, identified as Missy Gruball, 19-year-old college student from Burleson.
I can remember standing on the lawn, and I said, "There's Missy's car, but she's not out here with us. She was not accounted for."
So we had a general idea who our victim was, but that was not confirmed. This body was so distorted that they had to use a forensic odontologist to confirm Missy as the victim. Once we've identified the victim as Missy Gruball, we talked to her family in Burleson, and it's gut-wrenching. Missy's mother was devastated.
I had a daughter myself. That sort of hits home.
As investigators meet with Missy's family, word of her death spreads through the small community.
When I heard the news, my heart just dropped. Missy was so innocent and so pure and such an honest soul. She was so much fun, very friendly, nurturing. She would have given anything to help anybody. She was literally the most genuine person I've ever known. We were very active in church, she and I both were. Missy was very strong in her faith, very moral. She was always the person to do the right thing.
always.
In high school, her strength went beyond her faith.
Missy was very focused. She was a very hard worker. That's how she was so successful in school. She was in the high school band. She played the French horn, and she was amazing at it.
Even as a teenager, Missy had a clear vision of what she wanted and the drive to get it.
She wanted to go to the University of Texas at Arlington, and she wanted to get her own apartment. But she didn't want to burden her mother financially. So Missy was working to support herself to afford to be able to go to school.
But even though she wanted to stand on her own, Missy's heart stayed close to home.
She probably spoke with her mom every day on the phone. Missy and her mother were very close. They were a team in life and treasured each other.
You cannot describe the pain that Missy's mother went through. But I let her know, I really need you. You're going to help me find who did this to Missy, because she knew her daughter better than probably anybody.
Missy's mother tells detectives what she knows of Missy's activities on the last night of her life.
Well, Missy worked these late hours as a food server. She would always let her mother know that I'm home, I'm safe. On the night of Missy's murder, she'd call her mother late at night when she got home.
She finished her phone call with her mom and then dispatch getting a phone call that the apartment's on fire, establishing kind of a window as to when the actual murder would have occurred.
Police determined that Missy had been killed sometime between midnight and 3:30 a.m. It's not much for detectives to go on, but when they arrive back in Arlington, they have an unexpected lead waiting.
Once the victim's name had been released, one of our officers came forward and said, I took a report listing your victim.
A week prior to the death, Missy Gruball filed a police report on a guy that's staying with Missy who stole from her. And I'm thinking that very well could be our killer. We need to find this person. We need to talk to him. We need to get him in here as soon as possible.
Coming up, detectives track a dangerous suspect.
This individual made threats against her.
And soon uncover a lead they never expected.
It caught my attention immediately. Something is very suspicious here.
That puts them face to face with Missy's attacker.
I said, you killed Missy Gruball. Let's start talking about this.
Arlington police detectives are searching for the killer of Texas college student Missy Gruball. They've learned that the 19-year-old co-ed filed a police report a week before her death.
Missy had reported a co-worker took her tip jars, over $1,000 worth of tips.
Missy took the semester off in order to save more money, so all of her tip money was being hoarded so she could go back next semester to college.
The police report describes how Missy named a Charles Johnson as the potential thief, and that he had been staying with her before her money disappeared. Detectives speak to Missy's friends to find out more about Charles and his relationship to Missy.
Charles was a co-worker and apparently was someone that she thought was a friend of hers.
She socialized with coworkers, typically after work.
Young people she worked with, that's her crowd. Charles Johnson at that time, we are told, was homeless. And so Missy, being the very generous individual that she is, allows him to come stay with her. In fact, she even gave him a key to her apartment.
Missy was very kind-hearted, and I think that it was very easy for some people to take advantage of kind-hearted people.
Talking with her friends, there was a common theme about Missy. She was not only incredibly sweet, but incredibly naive. Too pure to see the bad in people. As an investigator, and that scares me because I see someone who is easily victimized.
Missy was very kind-hearted, and I think that it was very easy for some people to take advantage of kind-hearted people. Talking with her friends, there was a common theme about Missy. She was not only incredibly sweet, but incredibly naive. Too pure to see the bad in people. As an investigator, and that scares me because I see someone who is easily victimized.
Only days after Charles moved in, Missy discovers she has been played.
Missy finds out one day that about $1,000 is gone from her tip jar. Well, the only person that could have done that was Charles Johnson.
Enraged, Missy confronts Charles about the theft and kicks him out of her home.
Something else that was very important from everything that I learned about Missy was she will also stand up for what's right. So Missy immediately calls the police.
Missy filed a police report and a theft charge warrant was issued for Charles's arrest.
Here's some motive right here. This is retaliation for getting me in trouble. And so he's immediately on our radar. We want to see this guy. We want to talk to him. Problem is we didn't know where he was at. It's hard to find somebody who was basically homeless, and we had detectives that were assigned to find him.
While police search for Johnson, Missy's autopsy report comes in. It confirms investigators' belief that the fire is not what killed her.
The autopsy findings demonstrated she was dead before the fire started. She should have inhaled some smoke. We should have seen some soot. We should have seen some carbon monoxide in her blood. That's not the case here at all. She had a bruise of her left eye and an injury on the brow ridge that would be consistent with being struck by a fist or another object. Injuries directed that show that the assailant wanted to feel in control and dominant. A fatal stab wound to the chest was the actual cause of death. But it went completely through her heart and damaged her left lung, and there was a massive internal bleeding.
The autopsy also confirms detectives' worst suspicions. The attack was sexual in nature.
She had been forcibly penetrated. This was a rape homicide by a very aggressive perpetrator.
Though the fire destroyed physical evidence at the scene, the medical examiner immediately notifies detectives of a major discovery.
We did a search of the body for any remnant evidence that wasn't destroyed by the fire. Semen was recovered that could be analyzed for DNA.
Forensic evidence and physical evidence is great. You've got to have it. It leads you to your killer. So that semen was a forensic link to the suspect.
The semen is sent for DNA analysis, hoping it will point to the killer. But detectives make a calculated decision not to make the information public.
The fact that she was sexually assaulted was not public. It was not released. And the reason for that is because it's what we call guilt knowledge evidence. And it's knowledge that is only known by the person who did the crime. You never reveal that because that can lead you to that suspect and to identify him. That's very powerful evidence.
Other evidence is piling up too. Among the documents collected from Missy's apartment, detectives discover a treasure trove of personal letters.
These were letters from someone named Ivan Villa. The nature of the letters indicated some type of relationship between this individual and Missy Grubaugh. We don't know if it was romantic or not, but some type of close personal relationship. So that's important. We needed to find out who this individual was.
Detectives do a background check on Ivan, and they're alarmed by what they uncover.
Ivan was a registered sex offender. And that just set the hairs on the back of my neck up.
Yeah, this is the sort of individual that we're looking for. Let's go find Ivan right away.
Detectives investigating the rape and murder of Missy Grubaugh have found letters in the victim's apartment that reveal she was having a relationship with Ivan Villa, a young man with a dark past.
He was, in fact, flagged as a sex offender. And so he's immediately on our radar because we know that Missy was sexually assaulted.
Detectives examine the letters between Missy and Ivan and discover that they had a tumultuous relationship.
The context of those letters looked like a conflict of two young adults trying to make something work in a relationship that is filled with confusion.
The conflict centered around how far Missy would allow the relationship to go physically.
Missy was very moral. It was an admirable thing in our faith to remain pure until we were married. It's something that Missy took very seriously.
The letters suggest that Ivan and Missy may have come too close to crossing the line.
Apparently, there might have been times where they went a little further than Missy was comfortable with. You could tell that she was upset about that.
Missy's friends knew that she was not one to back down under pressure.
If she felt like she was being taken advantage of, then she would stand up for herself, and I admired that about her so much.
Bottom line is, we need to bring Ivan in. We need to talk to him because he was, in fact, in some level of a relationship with Missy at the time of her death.
2 days after Missy's murder, detectives bring Ivan in for an interview. He claims that he and Missy were working through their issues in a kind and loving way.
Ivan told me that he cared for Missy, and he wanted a relationship with her. He certainly did want to have that relationship go a step further, but Missy was convicted to her beliefs and to her faith. They were also battling with the fact that he had this crime over his head.
Ivan tells detectives he was home alone asleep the night Missy was murdered.
That's not an acceptable alibi for myself or Detective Stanton.
But was it really possible this young man could have committed such a horrible crime?
When you start talking about the personality of who you're looking for, you got to be careful. If you start picturing this person as this evil predator, you may miss the actual killer. That's why you have to follow the evidence. The fact that we had semen from the crime scene means we have forensic evidence that would either connect him or exclude him.
Detectives ask Ivan to provide DNA samples. But until those test results are revealed, detectives do not have grounds to hold Ivan in custody.
In 1994, those tests usually took anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
While waiting for results on DNA tests for Ivan and searching for Missy's former coworker Charles Johnson, detectives continue their investigation by canvassing Missy's friends at the restaurant and learn something that adds another suspect to the list. Although this time, this suspect could be at the very top.
The name Jeffrey Smith came up. Her work associates told us that Jeffrey Smith was an employee there who Missy reported and got him in trouble at work. What we were being told is that really upset him and angered him.
Restaurant staff tell the detectives that Jeffrey had threatened to kill Missy during an outburst, and he was fired a few weeks later after getting into a fight with a manager.
What we are being told is this individual was hot-tempered, and he had made threats against her. So we're putting all of this together and thinking, yeah, we really need to talk to this guy.
But who could imagine a coworker committing such a horrendous crime? Detectives speak with another employee at the restaurant who knows Jeffrey well.
His girlfriend, Kristen, agreed to come in to speak with Detective Stanton and I.
Visibly nervous, Kristen paints a troubling picture of her boyfriend.
Kristen told us that they were living together, but she also shared that she was concerned with his personality. He was very volatile. She was afraid of him, and she did not feel safe being there with him. She was going to move out and move back with her parents in Denton.
But it wasn't just fear for what Jeffrey might do that was causing Kristen to leave him. It was a fear of what he'd already done.
What Kristen wanted us to know, and she was very open about it, was she actually suspected that Jeff was involved in the murder of Missy.
Detectives investigating the murder of 19-year-old Missy Gruba are interviewing Kristen Waller, a young woman who believes her boyfriend, Jeffrey Smith, could be the killer.
She just basically said, "This is what my belief is." So I asked why. How did she formulate that? Kristen told us the night of Missy's murder, Jeff did not come to the apartment, and he didn't come back all night. So she didn't know where he was at. She also knew the conflict between her and him. So she's putting all this together, and she actually believed that Jeff was with Missy on that night and that he committed this crime.
Kristen gives detectives the phone number for where Jeff is staying. A background check shows the 22-year-old has no criminal history, but detectives are still suspicious.
We know that he had made some threats against Missy, and his whereabouts are unknown on the night of her death, so we needed to talk to him. I called Jeff Smith after speaking with Kristen, and he actually was cooperative and agreed to come to the police department.
In the interview room, detectives are struck by Jeff's demeanor.
Jeff Smith was smiling and nonchalant, just really not taking the entire situation that serious. I asked him, "What was your relationship like with Missy Gruba?" His story was she was infatuated with him. And as a matter of fact, her infatuation is what created the problems and the conflict between him and Kristen. Kristen's telling us, "No, I'm moving out because the guy scares me to death."
Jeff also has a conflicting account of his alibi.
He gave us this excuse that he was with Kristen. We already had information that he was not.
When detectives suggest Jeff is lying to them about his alibi, he laughs them off.
I've seen this type of personality before. He's narcissistic, he's cocky, he's arrogant. And I certainly wasn't going to take anything that he said at face value.
Despite their concerns about Jeff, detectives have no evidence to connect him to Missy's murder and are forced to let him go. But before he leaves, they ask him for a DNA sample. And to their surprise, he agrees.
He did give us the samples that we needed for a forensic analysis that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
Then, 4 days after Missy's murder, Detective Lenore gets a frantic call from Kristen about Jeffrey Smith.
He had abducted Kristen earlier in the morning, physically abducted her and drove off with her from her parents' home in Denton.
Kristen tells Detective Lenore that Jeff was distraught and held her in an apartment for 8 hours, threatening to kill her if she tried to leave.
Kristen's telling us the motive was that Jeff just didn't want her to leave him. He released her safely a little later that day, but now she didn't know where he was at. She was definitely afraid of him. She contacted the Denton Police Department and ended up getting a warrant for his arrest for kidnapping. He became a fugitive. You've got this guy who is a loose cannon, and there was a level of urgency to find him. We put out a national broadcast along with that warrant that he is also a suspect in a murder investigation.
With Kristen safely at her parents' house and police in several states searching for Jeff, detectives in Arlington find their murder investigation in a holding pattern.
As far as Jeff Smith, we do have his hair, his blood, and his saliva for DNA that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
DNA testing is still underway, but days later, investigators do get an important update from the lab.
They were able to type the blood from the semen, and they knew they were looking for someone with a certain type of blood.
Jeff did not match the blood type from the semen.
In addition to Jeffrey Smith, Ivan Villa is also ruled out because of his blood type, leaving Charles Johnson as the only active suspect for Missy's murder. And Charles is still at large.
That is incredibly frustrating because there is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
As the weeks pass with the case unsolved, Missy's family and friends grow more and more concerned.
It was very disheartening for a lot of us. We just watched the news and would hang on to anything that they would mention about it. It made all of us wonder why it happened to Missy. It was just devastating.
Then, a month into the investigation, detectives get a tip from an unexpected source.
I got a call out of the blue from Miss Grubauer. She wanted to let me know that she recalled a conversation that she had with Missy. It was so incredibly bizarre. And I just thought something is very suspicious here.
Detectives hunting the killer of college student Missy Grubauer have just received a lead that has turned up the heat on a case going cold. The victim's mother recalls a detail from the days just before Missy's death.
Missy's mom is providing information about how Missy had talked about this guy, Luis.
He was a 32-year-old man who had come over to the apartment, and the main thing that Mrs. Grubauer remembers is that he talked to her all night long till in the early morning hours, but then they got involved in a pillow fight.
At the time, Mrs. Grubauer thought little of the playful incident, but she suggests maybe Luis could help the investigation with information about Missy. Detectives have a different view.
This is bizarre. This is strange. The 32-year-old man had a pillow fight with her. It caught my attention immediately.
Investigators ask how Missy knew Luis.
Luis worked with Missy, and he lived at the Holly Park Apartments. She had done some babysitting for Luis's baby at the apartment complex.
Detectives' first stop? The restaurant where Missy and Luis both worked. Luis isn't there, but the manager tells them Luis is a model employee.
He was an Army veteran. I learned that about him. No criminal history. Matter of fact, management gave him an award for a heroic act. He actually stopped a robbery.
The detectives ask workers what they knew about Luis's relationship with Missy.
Co-workers described Louis as a friend. Sometimes after work, they might enjoy a beer together.
Detectives also hear something that catches them off guard.
A work associate relayed to us that Louis made the comment, and these were his words, is, "I hope they catch that son of a bitch that killed and raped Missy." The fact that she was sexually assaulted, no one should have known that. That was never released. He might have just been speculating, but the fact that it was said really, really alarmed me.
Investigators have uncovered yet another suspicious coworker in Missy's life, one that she saw every day. Detectives asked the manager for Luis's phone number.
Told him I was investigating the death of Missy Grubauer and that his name had surfaced from her babysitting his son, and Luis agreed to come see me. He was relaxed, he was polite, pleasant, regular, clean-cut guy. He told us that Missy used to babysit his son and that they worked together. So I told Luis what I want to do is exclude all of the known males to Missy so that I could find the guilty party. And the process in which I do that is I take samples, blood, hair, and saliva, compare it to the DNA and exclude them.
The request instantly changes Luis's mood.
His response immediately was, what are you talking about? Wasn't the evidence all burnt up? And I said, no, it wasn't. I've got significant incriminating evidence that was specifically left there by the suspect. Now his demeanor is changing, and you can see the concern in his face. I kind of even broke my own rule a little bit here, because a lot of times I don't like to give guilt knowledge information, but the fact that I knew that he had already said something about Missy being sexually assaulted, I went ahead and revealed to him whoever killed Missy sexually assaulted her, and I've got their semen. And Luis immediately says, you know, I've got to go. I have to leave. And I have no legal right to keep him, regardless of what I believe. I just simply asked, Luis, are you going to give me your sample? He says, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. We'll do it Monday.
Monday comes and goes with no sign of Luis, but detectives don't let up.
I call him. He calls me back Tuesday. We make arrangements for Wednesday. Come Wednesday, he doesn't show up again.
Detective Lenore calls Luis at work, but gets some alarming news.
Management had informed us that the woman that he was living with at the time, his common-law wife, had called and said that he had to leave town. I called her. I said, I hear Luis is gone. You and I need to talk.
Jeanette has been living with Luis for 2 years. The couple moved into the Holly Park Apartments 6 months earlier.
They had been together long enough for them to have a child together. She was also pregnant with another child. But what was interesting is on the Monday that Luis was going to meet with me, which was about 3 days earlier, they got married. They got legally married. Well, in Texas, a wife cannot testify against her husband. I mean, those are my thoughts that are going on. I kind of kept that to myself and said, okay, that's interesting.
Jeanette knew Missy as a sweet girl who used to babysit her son and had been shocked to hear about her murder.
And so I asked if she recalls what occurred on the night of Missy's murder. She said Luis had gotten off work about 10:30 or 11 and informed her that he was going to have some drinks with some friends. Then he came in close to midnight, and then she heard him leave.
2 hours later, Jeanette hears Luis return.
She hears him come into the apartment and takes a shower and then leaves again. And then she hears him come back again. She notices that he's coughing and he smells of smoke. His story to her is that he was out jogging and he noticed that there was an apartment on fire. And so he went in there and that he saw this individual on a bed, and he said it was Missy, and he tried to do mouth to mouth. He said, but he couldn't do it, and he was overcome by smoke, and that he had to leave, and he came back. That's it, end of story. They just go to bed. Nobody calls 911. Nobody does anything. They go to sleep. I mean, the story is so bizarre, but she didn't question him. And I don't think she ever really saw it for what it was until she actually sits down and starts telling me. And as she's telling me, reality is setting in as far as what Luis might have done. She's pretty much stunned. I said, I need to go into your apartment. I need to get a search warrant.
Investigators descend on Luis and Jeanette's apartment, just a few buildings over from where Missy was killed.
One of the things that I wanted was his dog tags. Because he was in the Army, I wanted to know what his blood type was. And I wanted to know if the blood type from his dog tags matched the blood type from the semen.
The blood type matches that of Missy's attacker. It's the link detectives have been looking for, and enough to bring Luis in. But first, they'll need to find him.
So I got an arrest warrant for Luis. The next day, I get a teletype that the vehicle that Luis was in was found abandoned and burned in San Antonio.
Detectives believe they have finally uncovered the man who murdered Missy Grubaugh and set fire to her apartment. But Luis Arroyo has fled Arlington. His car found abandoned and set ablaze in San Antonio.
We don't know, but suspected there was evidence there, but the car was pretty much gone. I mean, it was burned up.
There's an urgency. We need to find this person as soon as possible.
Detective Lenore suspects Luis's wife Jeanette knows where he's hiding.
I told her that we realize you had nothing to do with this crime, but you can be a party by covering and by lying. So I said, you realize that when she was murdered, she was sexually assaulted. And when she heard that, you could see it upset her. It angered her.
Confronted with the full horror of what was done to Missy, Jeanette gives up Luis.
Jeanette gave me the address where he was staying in San Antonio. San Antonio Police Department went into the home and arrested Luis without incident.
Detectives Lenore and Stanton traveled to San Antonio to confront Luis Arroyo in person.
It is the most unique interrogation I've ever seen. I mean, Luis really had like a mental regression, and he actually wound up in a ball on the floor, weeping and kind of in a fetal position.
I don't know what he was doing. I just thought he wanted us to have some type of empathy for him.
When Luis finally tells his side of the story, it doesn't add up for detectives.
He did not admit to sexually assaulting Missy Grubaugh. He did admit, yes, I did have sexual intercourse with her. He said, we had consensual sex. I knew it was her first time, and I wanted it to be a very gentle and pleasant experience for her. That just sickened me. What happened to that young lady was anything but gentle and loving. It was brutal.
Faced with Luis's denial, Detective Lenore changes tactics.
I said, you killed Missy Grubaugh. All right, let's start talking about this. And he said, you know, I don't remember. I remember getting a knife. I think I did stab her.
Detectives are stunned. Is this the confession they've been waiting for?
I'm not going to call it a confession, because my definition of a confession is someone who says, this is what I did and I did everything, that you have evidence that they committed. Luis gave a statement with several admissions that included guilt knowledge information. Luis did not admit to setting the fire, but he recalls that there was a fire set. He gave us all of this incriminating information that clearly said it was him.
They have enough to charge Luis. But detectives want to make the case against him airtight.
Detective Stanton and I got an evidentiary search warrant and collected his blood and his hair and saliva sample. He was, in fact, matched to the DNA from the sexual assault kit.
With Luis's statements, detectives can put together exactly what happened on the night Missy was murdered.
I believe he went there thinking he could convince her to have intercourse with him. His primary focus was to have sex with that young lady. Maybe initially he thought would be consensual, which it would never happen. So now he's mad at her, and then he took it to another level, physically abused her, sexually assaulted her, and then he killed her. After he killed Missy, he needed to destroy evidence, and that's when he made his decision to set fire to the apartment.
Lewis was charged with capital murder. Once we had the written statement, we had the statements from the wife. Pretty straightforward case.
As Luis awaits trial, detectives zero in on two former suspects in the case.
Charles Johnson was finally tracked down, and he was not even in the area at the time of the murder.
Jeffrey Smith was arrested and convicted of kidnapping his girlfriend, Kristen. He received a 4-year sentence. Luis Arroyo's trial lasts only 5 days.
We got a conviction rather quickly. And in Texas, once a person is convicted of capital murder with the death penalty waived, it's an automatic life sentence.
Although detectives have found their killer, the win is bittersweet.
He being in prison will never take away the pain, the horrific torture that child was put through. And him being in prison will never heal the wounds that the family has. They never recover. You can't bring Missy back. You just do what you got to do and make sure people pay for the crimes they commit.
Missy's mother is in a state of permanent grief. Missy's death did leave a very large void. Missy's life was taken way too soon, but it was a beautiful life. She was a beautiful soul, and she still is.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A hard-working New Mexico family.
My dad was up at 4 in the morning, wouldn't go down till 10 o'clock at night.
She was always the type of person to just help everybody.
Is murdered on Father's Day.
My parents are dead.
They were covered in so much blood.
That was the worst I've ever seen.
Police uncover a loving family.
He was a shaken baby. We were told he may never walk again.
With a startling criminal connection.
She has a history of burglaries.
And a jaw-dropping revelation.
I absolutely was shocked. I didn't think I have ever known anybody in my life who could do something that brutal.
To this day, I still can't understand how the person could do something this tragic, this gruesome.
They said, I know who did it, I know who did it.
El Rancho, a tiny New Mexico town home to just a few hundred families, a place filled with honest, hardworking people.
It's a very tight-knit community. It's kind of one of those places where everybody knows everybody.
On Father's Day 2011, police receive a 911 call that shatters the early evening calm.
Santa Fe 911, where's your emergency?
Listen, boy, Carl,
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know, I just went there and put the answer to the phone. Did you come out and I walked over to check right over the people was in the yard?
I can't hear you when you're yelling. Try not to yell into the phone, I can't understand you.
My parents are dead.
The caller is a 35-year-old woman named Cherie Ortiz Rios. Officers arrive at the property she shares with her parents, Lloyd and Dixie Ortiz. Police enter the home occupied by Cherie's parents and her brother to investigate, starting with the master bedroom.
Had observed a female laying face down in her nightgown attire, deceased.
The brutality that was involved was unspeakable.
She had some trauma on the right side of her temple region.
Police believe this is Cherie's 53-year-old mother, Dixie Ortiz.
As you walk out through the main door to the bedroom, there's a couple of steps up into a kitchen. That's where a deceased male was laying face down. That was probably the worst I've ever seen. There was several defects in his head and shoulder area.
Cherie tells police that this is the body of her 21-year-old brother, Stephen.
As you walk back out the room to the rear of the residence, there was another deceased male laying face down. And he had several injuries to his upper torso and his head region.
The dead man is Cherie's 58-year-old father, Lloyd. Detectives called in the medical examiner to take charge of the bodies. For now, they can only speculate about the cause and time of death.
There were limitations on how well we could examine the injuries because they were covered in so much blood.
It looked like something that had penetrated all of their bodies. So at that point, led us to believe that they were actually shot with some type of a firearm.
While the medical examiner carefully removes the bodies, a forensics team meticulously looks for evidence.
We did not find any shell casings. There wasn't a gun located. There was nothing that indicated that we had our murder weapon at the scene. We have no physical evidence as far as some type of a fingerprint. There weren't any footwear impressions in any of the blood. Maybe we can get some DNA, but we don't know that initially. That has to be sent to the lab for testing. With this type of crime scene, generally there's only a couple different types of motive. It's love, money, or anger. So we have to look into those. Lloyd's wallet was on the counter right next to where Stephen was lying in the kitchen. It had money in it. It didn't look like somebody was in there to steal from them.
There's no evidence to suggest this is a robbery, so police consider whether other motives could have been at play.
Who would stand to gain something from killing 3 people on Father's Day in their house?
Police need to learn more about the victims and their family. They turn to Cherie, who lives just steps away.
On the 2/3 of the property, Lloyd, Dixie, and their son, Stephen, lived, and the other third was occupied by Lloyd and Dixie's daughter, Cherie, her husband, Jesse, and their 2 children, Catalina and Robert.
When her sister arrives, a despondent Cherie can barely keep it together.
I remember my sister running up to me and telling me, that my mom and my dad and my brother were dead.
There were nothing I could do or say to make it better for her. 'Cause I love my sister so much, so much.
Cherie and Angela choke back tears as they tell police all about the most important people in their lives.
My mom and dad were the best parents that I could ever ask for. They were always there, always accepted us for who we were, always stood by our side, no matter what.
Lloyd was a tile contractor who was popular in the town.
My dad was amazing. Up at 4 a.m, wouldn't go down till probably 10 o'clock at night every day.
Lloyd had been married to Dixie for 34 years. She worked in a nursing home.
She didn't even think of that as being a job. It was just who she was.
Dixie's selfless, caring manner didn't stop with her work. In 1989, when their daughters were just teens, she and Lloyd took in a baby in need.
Stephen was 7 months old when he came into our home as a foster child. He was a shaken baby. His left side of the body was paralyzed. He had cerebral palsy. We were told that he may never walk, talk.
I would grab him out of the crib and stick him right next to me in bed, and he would sleep right next to me. I just loved him so much.
As he grew, the family's love helped transform Stephen into a strong and happy little boy.
Walking, potty training, the developmental milestones, they took a lot longer for him to reach, but he reached every single one of them.
Stephen was part of our church, and he was such an absolute joy. He would greet everybody. Everybody in church loved him. He made it a point to talk to everybody. He was quite a young man.
Stephen, Lloyd, and Dixie's lives have been cut tragically short. But why would someone murder such a loving family? Police find one possible reason: growing outside.
There were several marijuana plants that were being grown. There was a fenced-off area where there was 17 plants growing.
These plants were not visible unless you were directly over them. It was a very tight oxygen area that was padlocked.
A marijuana crop under lock and key outside the family home piqued detectives' interest. Had they just uncovered an illegal drug operation?
My parents had a medical marijuana card for my brother and a grower's license. So they were legally growing medical marijuana for my brother.
My brother had 2 brain surgeries to relieve some of the pressure in his brain, And so they prescribed medical marijuana to him to help relieve the headaches he was having. They were pretty debilitating at times.
The family had known that Lloyd was growing the marijuana for Stephen, and the family would smoke some of the marijuana.
While the marijuana was being grown legally, detectives suspect that it could have attracted the attention of the wrong people.
Was this some type of a drug-related incident?
Police become even more concerned when Cherie and her husband Jesse relay a story about a few suspicious characters they heard outside their home on the night of the murder.
They indicated that they were watching a movie that ended between 1:30 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Their dog started barking, and Jesse got up and walked to the front window. He saw a car that was parked outside.
He heard a kid yelling out there. He heard somebody say, "Hurry up, come on." And he was like, "There's somebody out there." And so he went back in and even grabbed a gun. And he got in his truck and he drove his truck toward that car.
Coming up, the autopsy reveals an unexpected cause of death.
It's not generally your weapon of choice. It's extremely violent, it's brutal.
And the town is stunned when the killer is revealed.
People were in disbelief. As a pastor, it was hard for me to even fathom.
Hours after Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz are found dead, police are hunting for the driver of a car seen outside the home the night before the murders.
We interviewed Lloyd and Dixie's daughter, Cherie, and she said that her husband, Jesse, saw a car that was parked outside and to the left of the property. He had indicated that the vehicle was a gray car.
The dog started barking crazy. My husband, Jesse, he came out and even got in his truck.
Cherie tells police Jesse followed the vehicle in his truck. But when detectives interview Jesse, he tells them a completely different story.
In Jesse's interview, he had failed to mention that he actually left the house that evening.
You never left the house?
No.
Why would your wife say you left the house?
That I left the house?
Why would she say that?
Maybe because I was outside or something.
She said she heard you leave the house. Why would she say that?
I don't know.
It was pretty concerning that he would forget one of the biggest details of that evening with his involvement.
As detectives continue to press Jesse, he suddenly remembers details from the night before.
Jesse.
You know what? I might have left the house. When I seen the car parked. You know what? That is correct. That is correct.
You see the issue?
Yeah, I do. I forgot about that. No?
It's something you don't just forget about, Jesse.
Well, I'm serious, man.
Man to man. You know where I'm going. Right. It's time to start talking.
I do remember, because I remember going back down there to get my keys. And I did get in my truck. And I drove towards the dead end that way.
What happened then?
I passed by.
Why would you not confront somebody right there?
Because I didn't expect anything.
Jesse, lying to me, dude.
I'm not lying to you, bro. I'm telling you the truth.
Jesse's changing story now has police eyeing him as a suspect. And when they ask him about his relationship with his in-laws, they think they may have hit upon a motive.
We found out something very alarming. There was some stuff in the close past that had caused some family tension between Lloyd and Jesse. And we knew at one point Lloyd was embarrassed of the way that Cherie and Jesse's property looked, so he actually built a fence in between the two properties so he didn't have to look at it anymore. So we knew there was some tension there.
Police can't rule out that tension in the family could have boiled over. Could Jesse have slipped out of the house and committed 3 heinous murders over a minor family squabble? To get to the truth, police grilled the couple about where they were the night of the murder.
They told us the timeline of where they were. They went to a casino. They were there for X amount of time, drove to their residence. They put in a movie right away. They were able to identify almost minute for minute of what they did that entire day, which is kind of unusual.
And when police ask Cherie about finding the bodies, she tearfully gives them a detailed account of the horror that unfolded.
And I walked in and I was like, Mom. And then I walked over to her to shake her, and her head was blown. And so I ran to the kitchen to check for my brother and my dad, and I thought it was my dad laying on the floor in his underwear because his face was so blown off. And so I ran home screaming for my husband. And my husband went back and he said, honey, that's Steven in the kitchen. Your dad's dead in the backyard.
Cherie's story is plausible, but one thing she can't explain is something she told police when she called 911.
They're dead. They have gunshot wounds to the head. They're dead. They've been dead since the morning.
Cherie said that she knew if she would have went over there, she could have saved him that morning, which told me that she had intimate knowledge of when the homicides actually occurred, which pretty concerning. How would she know that? We didn't know that timeline of when they were actually killed.
Detectives are no longer suspicious of just Jesse. Is it possible that the Ortiz's own daughter could be involved as well?
We did obtain DNA samples from Sherry and Jesse to try and analyze to see if there was anything that could be matched.
Police searched Cherie and Jesse's home, hoping to find a physical link to the murder. With so much activity in the tiny town of El Rancho, news of the crime spreads.
My wife and I raced down to the property. When we had got there, there was quite a few people there. Cherie was just outside herself. She was just hysterical.
Detectives can't help but wonder if Cherie's tears are genuine, yet they're unable to find any physical evidence to link Cherie or Jesse to the murders. When the autopsy report comes back the next day, they hope the results will help them shed some light on the mystery.
I actually did attend the autopsy, and during the course of the autopsy, the pathologist informed us that the wounds sustained were the result of impact trauma. They were killed with a pickaxe. Steven Ortiz, the son of Lloyd and Dixie, received 17 blows to the head from the pickaxe. Evidently, the victims were beaten long after they were already deceased.
The amount of force that was used to cause this was extreme. My initial reaction was, who had this much anger to want to kill him in such a gruesome manner?
After receiving the autopsy report on a horrific triple homicide in El Rancho, New Mexico, detectives have just discovered that the Ortiz family was killed with a pickaxe. Now that police know what to look for, they quickly set out to find the murder weapon.
One of the agents remembers seeing a Maddox-style pickaxe lying in an adjacent field to the west of the residence. So we immediately went to the scene and found our pickaxe, covered in blood. Processed it to the crime scene lab in Santa Fe and waited for results.
There was a lot of hope that there was going to be potential evidence that would link the assailant to the pickaxe.
There was nothing. There was nothing there. We got DNA that was identified on the pickaxe from the 3 victims. Nobody else.
Still, the murder weapon does tell police something about the killer.
It would take a great deal of force to cause that type of injury.
Police had to consider whether either of their suspects were strong enough to commit the crime. Jesse was capable. Was Cherie? While police search for answers, the small town of El Rancho is gripped with fear.
The whole community was on high alert. This kind of crime is very unusual for that area.
All we knew was that there were 3 dead people that the community loved, and nobody knew why and how.
Police continue to look into the alibis of the main suspects, Cherie Ortiz and her husband Jesse Rios, who said they'd been to a casino that night. Investigators see if their story can be verified.
They were seen on surveillance video at a gas station, and then they went to a casino.
This supports the couple's claims. Investigators also track what they did the rest of the evening.
We were able to pinpoint the length of time that it would take to drive from the casino to their house.
The timeline puts them in their home, right next door to the murders, at the time of the crime. But it's not nearly enough evidence to pursue a case. Police hope to utilize the publicity surrounding the murders and make an appeal for tips.
Everybody wanted to say who they thought it was, but didn't have any merit behind any of the stuff they were coming forward with.
Detectives also combed through their witness interviews and hit on a name they hadn't considered before.
Initially, Angela had mentioned that Nicholas Ortiz was a 16-year-old, just a regular kid in the community. Cherie had a son that was Nicholas's age, and they went to school together.
Nick Ortiz had a positive relationship with the family. There's no relation, by the way, between Nick Ortiz and the three Ortizes who were victim. It's just same last name.
Nicholas's family lived right up the road from us, and that's how him and my son had become friends.
He was having some troubles at home. Eventually, my sister opened up her home to him, gave him his own room.
He would go over next door to Lloyd and Dixie's house. They would give him money. They took him to the flea market. They took him everywhere. So they basically just treated him like he was one of the family.
But the transition to family member wasn't all smooth.
My husband and I had caught Nicholas going through our drawers. We had just started noticing a little bit of money missing. Things moved. So we started giving him an allowance every week for the chores he was doing as well.
Nick's troubles extended to school, too.
Nick had come home from school, and you could tell he had been punched in the face and was kind of beat up. I freaked out. Oh my God, who did this to you? He said, I joined a gang with some friends of mine, and I had to let them beat me up. And I was like, okay, so now today we're going to have the anti-gang talk. And I mean, we did.
The family tells police that joining a gang was just one example of the problems Nick brought to their home.
One night, my father had asked my son to cut down a plum tree that was dead in his backyard. And when they went out there, Nick was hiding behind some raised flower beds they had in their backyard. And the backyard was a secured area for the two little dogs they had, so both gates were locked from the inside. So he had to have jumped the fence to get back there.
Nick basically jumped up and kind of went towards him, in a joking manner, like to scare him. And Lloyd wasn't impressed by it. He didn't think it was funny.
After stealing from the family and joining a gang, this was the final straw for Lloyd.
He basically told Nick that he was not welcome at that property ever again.
It made us feel on guard and very uncomfortable, and we think it's best that it's time for him to move back home. I then text Nicholas and told him that he could come and pick up all the clothing and furniture that we had purchased for him over that time period, and he could take it home with him. I never really saw him again after that.
Could the Ortiz's rejection of Nicholas lead him to kill? Had he murdered Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen in cold-blooded revenge? The police bring in Nick for questioning.
Do you know anything about this case that could help us?
Police in El Rancho, New Mexico have a new suspect in the murders of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz. An unrelated 16-year-old named Nicholas Ortiz.
Do you know anything about this case that could help us?
I don't. The only thing that I've heard is what people have told me from the news.
He came off as this calm kid that didn't do anything wrong. He was just kind of like your baseline kid.
Detectives confront Nicholas about his speedy exit from the Ortiz home.
Lloyd just told you, what exactly did he say? You remember? Yeah.
Telling me that I effed up my trust with them, not to go near them anymore or anything. I said, okay, fine. So you guys want to leave? And that was really the last time we spoke.
Okay. How did you feel then?
The detectives ask where he was the night of the murder.
He said he was at home with his dad and sisters leading up to Father's Day. Between 12 and 1 o'clock, he woke his father up and wished him a happy Father's Day and went back to bed. And he was there when his mom got off of work, which was around 7:30 in the morning. Everything was corroborated as far as his alibi.
Not only does Nicholas have a solid alibi, his demeanor in the interview doesn't suggest he is the killer.
Do you think if you found out who did that?
If I found out who did it, I would call the police right away.
Police find people in the community who vouch for Nick.
Nicholas was part of our congregation. He was very, very gentlemanlike. He was kind. He was willing to help. He would stay late sometimes and help us pick up after the church.
Police cross Nicholas Ortiz off the suspect list. Then, 2 days after the murder, they get an urgent call from Cherie Ortiz.
I called the police and I told them we found out about a safe that was well hidden, enough where my sister and I didn't even know it existed. At my parents' house, my Uncle Walter had called me and said, I built your dad a secret piece of furniture that would hide a safe in it.
The unit was so well concealed, the police had not found it when they searched the house days earlier.
I said, I do not want to know any more until we contact the police. So we had to have it opened up there at the police station.
Inside was $80,000 in cash, as well as some of the life insurance paperwork.
That's when we found that my dad had been saving money for years. He had his retirement saved in there.
Cherie says she didn't know about the money, but police make a discovery that puts her claim in doubt.
We had learned through district court that the power of attorney had been given to Cherie at this point, and she was basically going to be the heir of hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance policies that Lloyd and Dixie had. And that $80,000 that was in the safe was part of a cash out from those life insurance policies.
Cherie says she didn't know about the insurance policy. The inheritance was large enough to give Cherie and Jesse a powerful motive for murder. But motive alone wasn't enough to arrest either one of them.
We have no physical evidence that could tie Cherie and Jesse to the crime.
The discovery of the safe also causes police to speculate on how the Ortizes had amassed so much money. Could it have anything to do with the marijuana growing on the property?
Kind of raised some concern to us as to why he was growing it. Are they possibly selling this stuff?
Detectives investigate whether Lloyd was secretly involved in trafficking. The answer comes back clear.
Nothing was taken from this house. It didn't even appear that whoever was there at the time knew that there was pot plants being grown behind this fence. And knowing anything about the industry of marijuana, there were smaller plants, they weren't mature. We were able to pretty much rule out that the gangs were tied in to this.
It's another blow for the investigation. And as days turn to weeks, detectives are no closer to catching those responsible.
Essentially, you do run out of leads or you run into dead ends. As frustrating as it was for us as investigators, it had to have been exponentially worse for the family.
I was on the phone with the police every single day asking, what have they heard? Anything new? What can I do to help? And we were always told, nothing. There's nothing you can do.
I truly felt like they were not ever going to solve this case.
Then, 16 months after the murders, detectives get the break they've been praying for when they receive a call from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department.
In October of 2012, I had just gotten home from work and I got a call that there's somebody there that wants to give some information to me in reference to the homicide. And she was in jail. She said she just wants to get something off her chest.
Detectives are hopeful a new tip will finally help solve the murders of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz. The information comes from a young woman in the custody of Santa Fe police.
Ashley Ball was 24, and she has a history of burglaries and of drug use.
Ashley told officers that she knew something about the El Rancho murders. At that point, ears started to perk within law enforcement.
Before questioning Ashley, police look into her background.
Ashley grew up in El Rancho.
Ashley wasn't necessarily a troubled teen per se, but she got in trouble a lot.
From a young age was in and out of the detention center.
Lead detective Craig Bobnock questions Ashley about what she knows.
As I started explaining that it was a voluntary interview, she kept interrupting me saying, "I know who did it, I know who did it."
Ashley claims that on the night of the murder, she was smoking weed with her cousin, Jose Roybal, and a mutual friend.
They needed money, so they were gonna go hit the Ortiz's house. And I took them, I dropped them off, and I went back home.
She told me that she owned a gray 1997 Saturn car, two-door car, during the time of the homicide. So I immediately thought of Jesse's statement.
Cherie Ortiz's husband, Jesse Rios, had told police he saw a gray car driving slowly past their house late on the night of the murder. But it's what Ashley says next that grabs detectives' attention.
I got a call about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later.
The call was from Jose's friend, and he needed a ride.
He got in my car, he had blood on his pants, he had a trash bag tied around his right foot. That's when he told me that he killed Stephen, Dixie, and Lloyd. He said he threw the pickaxe by the fence. He kept saying he killed him, he messed up, he killed him.
Ashley told me that the single person that killed the Ortiz family was Nick Ortiz.
Ashley's revelation is explosive. This family took in Nick when he was having trouble at home.
He stayed there for upwards of a couple of months, in which he got very close with the family. He would eat there, he would get off the school bus there. It was basically his home, and they took him in.
But police need to be sure Ashley's telling the truth. After all, she has a rap sheet, and their suspect has an alibi.
The information that Ashley Roybal provided had to have come from somebody who was actually there during the incident.
Ashley explains another detail that puts her at the scene.
Do they wear gloves? Do they care about fingerprints usually?
He had a sock on his hand.
He did have a sock on his hand?
Mm-hmm.
Police are hopeful they can find evidence in Ashley's car, but it's nowhere to be found.
It's 18 months later. She had said she had sold it to a tow company. The vehicle ultimately ended up at the shredder. Couldn't find it.
Investigators had to find another way to verify her story.
I received a lot of the phone logs, and that was my big piece of evidence at this point.
Cell phone records show the communication between Nicholas, Ashley, and her cousin Jose peaked around the time of the murders, so investigators immediately bring Nick back in to confront him with the evidence.
So I brought Nick in. He's in 100% denial of everything until I bring up the phone records.
I'm just gonna show you, these are your texts between you and Jose. You're the orange and he's the white. That's how much you guys texted on Saturday night into Sunday morning. Is it surprising?
Well, with all due respect to you guys and all that, I'd really like to just stop talking and go home now.
Okay.
I want another chance at another interview with him, so I didn't want to ruin it. So we ended the interview.
Investigators' next move is to haul in Jose for questioning. Since he's a minor, they get permission from his parents to speak to him.
He was 15 at the time. He drank a lot. He had problems at home. He didn't have a good reputation.
Police talk to Jose, and he opens up.
Ashley dropped me and Nick off so we could go rob the house. She left. Nick told me he would go in. He wanted me to go in with him to go kill. And I told him no. I didn't want to. I was scared. He started walking towards the house. When he started walking towards the house, I ran to the river. I got to my house. And then Ashley and Nick show up. Nick is white as a ghost. I knew he had did it. He told me he had did it. He told me he did it.
Jose's story matches Ashley's, and suddenly police have two witnesses against Nicholas.
On February 12th, 2015, I got the approval from the district attorney to get an arrest warrant for Nick Ortiz. District court judge signed it and said, go pick him up.
Just like before, Nicholas remains uncooperative.
So I brought him in a copy of the criminal complaint. There were 5 total charges on the criminal complaint that I gave him. He said, I don't agree with 2 of these charges on here. And there were only 2 charges that were different from murder. So it's an admission to me. I knew I had him at that point. It was him.
With Nicholas taken into custody, detectives finally have some news for the Ortiz family.
I absolutely was shocked when the police said he had done this. I didn't think I have ever known anybody in my life who could do something like that brutal. I've never met anybody that could hurt people so grossly. It didn't make sense because that was not at all his personality when he lived with us.
People were in disbelief. As a pastor, it was hard for me to even fathom the fact that a young man like this could do something so tragic, this gruesome.
On June 15th, 2015, Nicholas goes to trial for massacring the Ortiz family.
Nick was a minor at the time. Given the fact that this was a heinous triple homicide, the judge did agree with my office that Nicholas should be charged as an adult.
When the trial starts, the prosecution is confident of a conviction until an unexpected development jeopardizes the whole case.
So in the middle of trial, we received a big surprise in Jose changing his testimony completely.
Nicholas Ortiz alone stands accused of a savage triple murder. His 2 former friends are taking plea bargains to testify against him. But just as prosecutors think it's a cut and dry case, the unexpected happens.
So in the middle of trial, we received a big surprise in Jose changing his testimony completely, pointing at Ashley as the individual who instructed them to kill the family.
Originally, the plan was to rob the Ortiz family, but according to Jose, Ashley had something more sinister in mind.
Jose Roybal testified that Ashley said, "Why don't you just kill them?"
It's a stunning statement, which the defense denies.
The case agent said, well, she said she didn't say that. And then the lawyer said, yeah, but Jose Roybal says she did, so somebody must be lying. Jose testified that Ashley gave the 2 boys socks to cover up their hands and plastic bags with Kleenex in them to cover up their feet so that they wouldn't leave traces there. He also said that she is the one that handed Nick the weapon.
According to Jose, In the early hours of June 19th, 2011, Ashley tells Nicholas and Jose it's time to put her unthinkable plan into action.
Ashley takes Jose and Nick to the Ortiz house, drops them off.
Jose got scared. He left. He ran home. Nick went towards the house.
He knocks on the back door. Lloyd Ortiz gets up out of bed. When he opens it, he's attacked by Nicholas with the pickaxe.
He didn't stop there. He went into the house and struck Dixie twice in her temple on the right side of her head with the pickaxe.
Nicholas moved on to the kitchen looking for the money, but he found Stephen instead.
Recognizing who is in his house, Stephen puts up a fight.
Nick delivers 17 blows to his head and body and kills him.
After Nick killed the three Ortizes, he didn't take anything. He got scared, so he just left. He walked out the door and called Ashley.
The revelations come as a shock to the victim's family.
Every day that we were at that trial, it was devastating because we learned things. I learned things that I didn't know. And I wish I hadn't, because it still haunts me.
Nick doesn't say a thing during the entire trial. It's Jose's word against Ashley's. How would their competing testimonies affect the jury?
The case was based almost entirely on Ashley and Jose's testimony, and that was a point of contention amongst people up until the sentencing.
After 3.5 days, I remember the jury went into the courtroom, and the foreperson said, no matter how much time you give us, we're just not going to come to a consensus. So the judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial.
It was horrible. It was devastating to me.
I felt like our hearts had been ripped out. We had all this hope.
Luckily, we have the opportunity to try them again, which we did.
17 months later, in December 2016, the case goes back to court.
Luckily, this time around, we proved to all 12 jurors that Nicholas Ortiz was the individual that killed those three people.
On October 28, 2019, Nicholas is sentenced to 25 years in prison. The victory rings hollow for the victim's loved ones.
What that felt
anyone can read the future.
Shut down.
A Noxon knows what he is and what he is doing.